Well, good Tuesday evening, Living Water Church. And yes, yet again, it is Tuesday and not Monday. And not only is it Tuesday, it's like 9 something at night on Tuesday. And that's just how this week has gone so far. It's been busy and it hasn't gone exactly to my plan. And things, guys, don't always work out exactly as we want them to. Sometimes in the pursuit of what God's called us into, sometimes in just the natural pursuit of life and the things of this life, that things don't happen exactly as we want them to. That there are trials, there are troubles, there are just standard things in life that cause us to be busier than we want to be. Things take longer than we want them to take. It just seems to be the natural state of this world. And in fact, literally every time I go to work on a project at home, it ends up taking me like double the time that I anticipated for it to take, until when I talk to my wife and she just says, just plan on it taking twice as long. And in my mind, I think if I planned on it taking twice as long, it's going to take 4 times as long than originally I wanted it to take, because it just always seems to work out that way. But I can tell you this, guys. God, nothing happens outside of his time frame. Nothing happens outside of his control. That everything that he wants to happen is going to happen exactly when he sanctions it to happen. But guys, that's not the case for our human lives. And guys, sometimes too, in the process of that, things get way out of our control. Things that we can't understand, things that we can't control, things that we can't seem to process properly in our lives. And what we have to do in those times, in those moments, is trust in the sovereignty of God. Trust that he has a plan, even when we can't see a plan. And what we talked about on Sunday was kind of this idea of submission to the Lord, but submission to the authorities that he set in place and set in motion. And I can tell you with certainty that there are going to be times in your life, times that you do not understand why the things that are happening around you are happening. Times when the process that God has us in seems to take longer than we anticipate. Times when you are striving for something in your own life and it just seems to never come to completion. It just seems to never be fulfilled. There's times when you're waiting and looking at the outside world. You're looking at the world that we live in, this broken world, and wondering, Lord, when are you going to come and fix this? When are you going to show up? When is your presence going to be made manifest here that we can come before you in truth, in spirit, and all I see is more and more and more brokenness happening. And Lord, when are you going to move? When are you going to act? And guys, in those same exact times, what we have to just trust in our spirit and faith is that God has a perfect plan, and things are going to happen in his perfect timing. And what our job is not to question that timing. Our job is not to wonder and wait and be anxious. It says, don't waste your time being anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough trouble of its own. And I think, guys, if we really look deep down inside in our hearts, we know that to be true. Today has enough worries of its own. Why am I wasting my time and attention and energy worrying about tomorrow and being anxious about tomorrow? And I think what's really kind of exciting about surrender and exciting about having an authority in Jesus Christ in our lives is understanding, guys, he's in charge. And when we work for somebody at a business or at a job, we can really start to understand this. It's so different. I ran my own business for about 11 years, and it's vastly different than working for somebody else, because at the end of the day, when you are working for somebody else, generally you can just sign out. You can punch the clock, and this is, I know, not for every job, but generally you can just punch the clock and you can go home, and that's the end of your workday. And you know what? If the business falls apart and fails and things don't go well, that's not on you, it's on your boss. Your job is to show up when you're called to show up, work as if unto the Lord. And then, you know what, when it's time for you to be done in that assignment, in that job, in that area, then you punch out and you're done. And it's very similar for the things God calls us into. He calls us into a task or into an assignment or something, and that might be short term or long term or whatever that looks like in your life. But ultimately, you're not the boss. You're not in charge. God's in charge. And we have to trust and remember that. And when I was running my own business, I can tell you, there was never a punch out time. There's never a time where I was done. It was, I would go home and the things that I had left to do would consume my mind. And it's a really great image of really how we try to take on the power and authority of God. If I was not the owner of the business, if I was not the one that was in control of everything, I would have been able to stop, most likely at that time of stopping, and go home and disconnect where I needed to be, understanding one thing that was so important and vital in my life, and that's that I was not in charge. Now, the problem is, guys, oftentimes we take ourselves in a mode of surrender, and we move from that mode of surrender to place ourselves squarely on the throne. We try to take back over the authority that we have said that is only in Jesus' hands. We try to take ourselves and put ourselves on the throne. And what happens in that mode is we try to do two things. One, we try to control everything around us. And two, we become anxious about the things around us because we can't possibly have the same power and authority that Jesus Christ has. We do not have the same nature as Christ. We cannot handle what Christ is able to handle. So we can't handle being in charge of this world. We can't handle having an authority over this world. Only in the omnipotency of Jesus Christ, having all the power, can he handle that. So guys, we have to trust that he's sovereign. We have to trust that things are going to happen in the exact same time he sanctions them to happen. And we are called to come humbly in spirit. And if you guys remember the verse that I had you guys memorize over the summer, during the summer of apologetics, that's 1 Peter 3:15. And it says, "In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is within you." And now, if we remember what we talked about on Sunday, that verse is so much more in-depth and important than we even realize, because it says, in that mode of surrender and submission, not only to Jesus Christ, but to anyone he's placed in authority over us, in that mode, if we are following God in truth, and it is against something that is happening in the world around us, and now we have persecution for that, if you are following Jesus in the morality that he's called you into, and it goes against the fabric of this world, and then the world looks down upon you in persecution, or maybe you even get in trouble with a law of the land because that law goes against the morality of God. If that's the case, that's when Peter says, that's the same progression of thought that he's using that we started off on Sunday, when he's talking about how we are called to honor the governmental authorities in our life. And then he goes on in the end of chapter 2 and into chapter 3 and starts talking about the local authorities in our life, and then the authority within the family structure. And he's talking about that authority structure, and then he goes right into saying, but in your hearts. He's saying, okay, look at the outside. Look at the authority Jesus holds and all that he gives to human institutions and into the family structure. And he says, guys, but what is most important is that in your hearts you honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason. Why would they ask? Why they would ask is because in the moment of submission, because you've always submitted, you've always had the love in your heart to submit to the authority that Jesus Christ has placed in the moment that you do not submit, there's going to be a question as to why. Why are you not submitting in this thing? And now it says, always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is within you. And it's the same progression of thought that Peter's in. It's a letter to the church. It's not like he switched thoughts. He's in the thought of saying, always be in submission to those governing authorities. So that way, at the moment in time when you are not able to submit anymore, as you're submitting to God's authority and not to that human institution for something that they are doing against the morality of God, that is your opportunity to speak about the love of God, about the purpose of God's plan in this world, about the law that he has commanded you into following, about the nature of God. And now that is our opportunity, and we have to be ready. We have to be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is within us. And how much more pointed, if you guys remember what we talked about on Sunday in relation to what the Roman policy was in the time in paying homage to Caesar and not to the Lord. Now, we are probably not going to be called into that in this country, but yet we should be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is within us. So that's why I was so excited to see how many of you turned up to the apologetics class this past Friday. I pray that you would continue to pray about showing up to the next class, which is going to always be on the last Friday of every single month, 6:30 p.m. here at the church. And I know we had over 30 people show up to this last class, and thank you guys so much for your diligence in desiring to learn that reason, the reason that you have for the hope that is within you, and learn it well, and learn it with the ability to share it. So thank you guys so much for all that came out to that class on Friday. And if you missed that first one, feel free to come out to the next class. We're going to recap what we talked about, so you're not going to miss anything. You can message me privately if you want a quick catch up on that. But the last Friday of every month, 6:30 p.m. here at the church is where we're going to have that apologetics class. The next thing we have coming up, guys, is on May the 21st. Starting at 11 a.m., we have a mother-daughter's tea for moms and daughters that are 5 years and up. So if you have a mom and if you have a daughter and you want to come together and meet together for a mother-daughter tea, there's going to be a time of fellowship. They're going to have some people speaking here, and it's going to be from 11 to 1. And we do need an RSVP for this, ladies. So please RSVP to Kathy French by the 14th of May. Her number is going to be in the description below. So, guys, those are the only two local things that we really have coming up really in the very near future. Keep your ear out. We're going to be going back to Meet Me at the Park shortly here. In the next few weeks, you're going to start seeing information about that coming. That's going to be an event that happens after church on Sunday. Instead of staying here in the building and fellowship, we're going to head over to James Byrd State Park every other week after church and hang out as a church family over there, have some lunch, play some games, and do things like that. So I'll keep you posted on the dates as soon as I have them. But guys, that's really all we have coming up for the next couple of weeks here. You can check out the church calendar for our small group events and other things we have going on. And if you have anything, other questions or need anything at all, my number is in the description below. Just a joy and honor to be able to serve the King of Kings and the Lord of Glory with you in this fellowship that he's drawn us into. Love you guys.